The huge crystal room where all the alien leaders met was shaking, not from any earthquake or attack, but from pure terror. Ambassador Thexval stood in the center, her blue skin turning pale as she shared news that would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about war and peace. For thousands and thousands of years, every smart species in the galaxy had learned one simple rule: never fight. Fighting meant dying. Fighting meant your whole planet would be destroyed. Fighting meant the end of everything you loved. This wasn't just a rule, it was like breathing. You didn't think about it, you just knew it was true. The Zephyrian people had built their entire world around avoiding conflict. If two Zephyrians disagreed about something, they would spend weeks finding a peaceful solution. Sometimes they would even change their entire way of living, just to avoid any chance of an argument. Other alien species did the same thing. The ethereal collective would rather abandon their homes than risk any kind of fight. The crystal minds would shut down their thinking processes for days rather than have conflicting thoughts. But now, deep in space, their most advanced watching stations had picked up something impossible. Radio signals from a distant part of the galaxy showed a species that broke every rule of survival. These creatures called themselves humans, and they were doing something that should have destroyed them long ago. They were fighting each other and somehow getting stronger because of Captain Lee Minho was just doing his normal job, flying around the outer edges of human space, checking for problems. He didn't know that alien listening devices were recording every word he said. He was talking to his crew about their training exercises, planning battle strategies, and the strangest part, he was laughing while he did it. Not the crazy laugh of someone who had lost their mind, but the happy laugh of someone enjoying their work. If we get attacked from the left side, Minho had said to his weapons officer, we can use that asteroid field as cover and come around behind them. It'll be tricky, but it could work. Then he had actually chuckled and added, remember that time Kim got so excited during practice that he forgot to turn on his safety systems? His face was priceless when the simulation exploded. The alien listeners couldn't believe what they were hearing. These humans were not only planning for war, they were finding it funny. They were sharing stories about past battles like humans might talk about a fun game they played with friends. This was completely impossible according to everything aliens knew about intelligent life. Thexval had spent weeks studying the human transmissions with the galaxy's best mind readers and behavior experts. What they found made no sense at all. Human civilization wasn't falling apart because of war. It was growing stronger. Their technology was advancing faster than any peaceful species. Their population was growing. Their culture was spreading to new planets. Everything that should have happened when a species chose violence was happening in reverse. They have something they call military academies, Thexval explained to the terrified council members. Places where they teach their young ones how to fight better. But these schools also teach honor, protection of others, and something called rules of war that limit how much damage they cause. They actually have laws about being nice to their enemies. The alien leaders looked at each other with growing panic. Their own species had tried to study war long ago, and it had nearly destroyed them every time. The methane breathers had almost wiped themselves out just by thinking too much about conflict. The plant people had actually lost the ability to make decisions for 100 years after their philosophers considered whether it was okay to step on smaller plants. But humans seemed to think about war all the time and somehow stayed sane and happy. They made movies about battles, wrote books about famous fights, and taught their children about historical wars in school. Instead of becoming more violent and crazy, they seemed to become more caring and creative. Some of the council members were already packing their things, ready to run to the furthest corners of the galaxy. Others wanted to build huge walls around human space to keep them contained. A few suggested they should destroy humanity before these dangerous beings could spread their war-loving nature to other species. But Thexval had one more piece of information that made everything even more confusing. The humans weren't just fighting each other, they were also working together. The same Captain Minho who laughed about battle plans had spent the previous month helping evacuate civilians from a natural disaster on a nearby planet. The human military ships that practiced warfare during the day were delivering medical supplies and food to poor colonies at night. This was the most frightening thing of all. Humans had somehow learned to be warriors and peacekeepers at the same time. The emergency meeting in the crystal chambers lasted for 3 straight days. Alien leaders from across the galaxy argued, panicked, and tried to figure out what to do about the human problem. Some wanted to run away to distant galaxies. Others suggested building massive shields around their home worlds. But Elder Korthai, the oldest and most experienced diplomat in galactic history, had a different idea. "We use Protocol Omega," he announced, his ancient voice echoing through the chamber. Every alien in the room went silent. Protocol Omega was their last resort, something they had only used twice in the past 1,000,000 years. It meant sending their biggest, most powerful diplomatic fleet to deal with a species that was too dangerous for normal contact. The last time they had used it was against a race of energy beings who were accidentally destroying stars just by existing. Within hours, the largest peaceful fleet in galactic history was assembled, 300 ships, each one the size of a small moon, equipped with the most advanced shielding technology ever created. These weren't warships. The galaxy didn't build those anymore, but they were designed to survive almost anything. Each ship carried the finest negotiators, psychologists, and cultural experts from dozens of different species. The fleet's mission was simple: approach the humans, deliver an ultimatum, and make them stop being dangerous before they could spread their violent nature to other parts of the galaxy. The message they planned to send was clear: stop all aggressive activities immediately, and agree to galactic supervision, or face the combined opposition of every civilized species in the known universe. Commander Park Ji-woo was having a pretty normal Tuesday when everything changed. He was running training exercises with his crew near Mars, practicing rescue operations and testing their new communication systems. His ship, the Peaceful Dawn, was one of Earth's newer patrol vessels, designed for exploration and humanitarian missions rather than fighting. The crew was in the middle of a simulated emergency drill when their communications officer, Lieutenant Song Yun-ah, suddenly went very quiet. "Commander," she said slowly, "I think you need to hear this." The transmission that came through their speakers was unlike anything humans had ever received. It was translated by advanced computer systems into perfect Korean, but the tone and content were completely alien. The voice was formal, cold, and absolutely terrifying in its certainty. "To the species known as humans," the message began, "the Galactic Council has determined that your aggressive expansion and warfare-based civilization poses an existential threat to all peaceful life in this galaxy. You are hereby ordered to immediately cease all military activities, surrender your weapons technology, and submit to permanent galactic oversight. You have 1 solar rotation to comply." The bridge went completely silent for about 10 seconds. Park looked around at his crew, engineers, medics, scientists, and communications specialists who spent their days helping people and exploring space. Then somebody in the back started giggling. It started small, just a little chuckle from engineer Kim Dong-hyun. But then navigator Lee Soo-jin joined in, followed by medical officer Choi Hana. Within minutes, the entire bridge crew was laughing so hard that tears were streaming down their faces. "Wait, wait," Park managed to say between gasps of laughter. "They think we're what? Galactic conquerors?" He wiped his eyes and looked at the tactical display showing their current mission: delivering medical supplies to a mining colony that had suffered equipment failures. The alien fleet waiting at the edge of human space had expected many possible responses to their ultimatum: anger, fear, defiance, or even surrender. They had psychological profiles prepared for dealing with aggressive species, desperate species, and calculating species, but they had no idea what to do with the species that found their demands hilarious. Park's response transmission probably confused the aliens even more than their original discovery of human warfare. Instead of threats or negotiations, he sent them what humans called a care package of information. Medical records showing human doctors treating patients from former enemy nations. Videos of peace treaties being signed after major conflicts. Documentation of humanitarian aid missions to disaster zones. But the part that really broke the aliens' understanding was the combat footage. Park included actual recordings from human military operations, thinking it would help explain their perspective. The aliens watched in complete bewilderment as human soldiers in the middle of active combat zones were cracking jokes over their radio communications while simultaneously risking their lives to evacuate wounded enemy combatants. In one video, Sergeant Lim Hai-wan was pinned down by enemy fire while trying to reach an injured opponent. Her radio chatter included tactical updates mixed with commentary about the weather and a running joke about her squad leader's terrible cooking. When she finally reached the wounded enemy soldier, she immediately began treating his injuries, while calling for medical evacuation for someone who had been shooting at her just minutes earlier. The alien psychologists watched these recordings dozens of times, trying to understand how a species could simultaneously engage in combat and show compassion for their enemies. Their computer models kept giving error messages when they tried to analyze human behavior patterns. Dr. Vethmore, the galaxy's leading expert on violent species, sent an emergency report back to the Council. These humans appear to have somehow separated the concept of conflict from the concept of hatred. They fight when necessary, but they do not seem to enjoy causing suffering. This should be impossible according to all known psychological principles. The most disturbing part for the aliens was that humans seemed to genuinely believe their approach to conflict was normal and reasonable. The meeting room aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony was designed to make everyone feel calm and peaceful. The walls glowed with soft, warm light that changed colors based on the emotions of the people inside. Comfortable seats were arranged in a circle so that no one person seemed more important than others. This was where the galaxy's most skilled diplomats usually solved problems between different species. But today the room's calming technology was working overtime. The alien delegates were so confused and worried that the walls kept flickering between nervous yellow and anxious red. They had invited Dr. Kim So-jin, one of Earth's leading experts on how different minds work, to help them understand something that seemed completely impossible. Kim was a small woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice, but she had spent her career studying the most difficult questions about human behavior. She had written books about why people fight, why they make peace, and how they manage to stay sane in terrible situations. Now she found herself trying to explain humanity to beings who thought war was like a deadly disease. "Let me start with something simple," Kim said, settling into her chair and looking around at the gathered aliens. "When humans face danger, we have a choice. We can panic and fall apart, or we can find ways to stay strong. Laughter is one of our strongest tools for staying strong." Elder Vosh Tai, a creature that looked like a walking tree made of silver, metal, leaned forward with interest. His species, the ancient observers, had been watching other civilizations for millions of years, but they had never seen anything like humanity. "But how is this possible?" he asked, his voice sounding like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "When our species encounters conflict, even small disagreements, we become paralyzed with fear. The stress literally shuts down our thinking processes. How can you function while actively engaging in warfare?" Kim smiled and pulled out a small device that projected images into the air above the table. The first image showed two human soldiers sitting in a damaged building, sharing a meal and telling jokes while explosions could be heard in the distance. "These men fought against each other just 5 years ago," Kim explained. "Their countries were enemies. They tried to kill each other in battle. But look at them now." The image changed to show the same two men working together, building a school in a war-torn area. They became friends after the fighting ended. They decided that their shared experience of surviving something terrible was more important than their old disagreements. The alien delegates looked at each other in confusion. Ambassador Thexaval's tentacles writhed nervously as she spoke. "This makes no sense according to our understanding of psychology. Trauma should create permanent damage, permanent fear and hatred. How do these individuals move past such experiences?" Kim changed the image to show a human military cemetery, where thousands of graves were marked with flowers and small flags. "We remember our conflicts, but we use them to learn. These memorials aren't just about honoring the dead, they're about teaching the living. Every year, families from different sides of old wars come together here. They share stories, they cry together, and they promise to do better." She showed more images. Former enemy pilots working together on civilian aircraft, doctors who had treated battlefield wounds now collaborating on medical research, engineers who had built weapons now designing hospitals and schools together. You see, Kim continued, humans discovered something important a long time ago. Fighting teaches us things that peace cannot. It shows us how strong we can be, how much we can sacrifice for others, and how precious life really is. But the most important thing it teaches us is that our enemies are usually not that different from us. Dr. Zeflak, a creature that looked like a floating brain surrounded by glowing energy, pulsed with different colors as he processed this information. But surely this cannot apply to all forms of conflict. What about existential threats? What about enemies that cannot be reasoned with or befriended? Kim's expression grew more serious. That's where our approach becomes even more important. When we face something that truly wants to destroy us, we don't face it alone. All those old enemies who became friends, all those different groups who learned to work together, they all stand together against the real threat. She showed historical footage of human space colonies where people from dozens of different cultures and former enemy nations worked side by side. We learned that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. When someone attacks humanity, they're not just attacking one group. They're attacking a family that includes former enemies who chose to become brothers and sisters. Elder Voshitai was quiet for a long moment, his metallic leaves rustling with thought. You speak of turning conflict into cooperation, enemies into allies. But what happens when you face something that cannot be converted, cannot be reasoned with? What if you encounter a force that exists only to destroy? Kim was about to answer when suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Emergency, lights flashed, and the calm atmosphere of the meeting room was shattered by urgent announcements in multiple alien languages. Captain Park Ji-woo's voice came over the communications system, speaking in rapid Korean before switching to Galactic Standard. All personnel to emergency stations. We have multiple contacts approaching at high speed. These are not ships. Repeat, these are not ships. They appear to be artificial constructs of unknown origin, and they're not responding to any communication attempts. Through the meeting room's viewing ports, everyone could see space itself seeming to darken as something massive approached. Kim looked out at the approaching threat, and then back at the worried alien faces around her. Elder Voshitai, she said quietly, I think you're about to get your answer. The darkness approaching them wasn't empty space. It was something far worse. Long-range sensors showed thousands of metallic objects, each one the size of a small moon, moving in perfect formation toward their position. These weren't ships carrying living beings. They were machines, cold and calculating with only one purpose: to consume everything in their path. Elder Voshitai's metallic leaves began shaking as he recognized what they were facing. The Devourers, he whispered, his voice filled with ancient terror. We have encountered them twice before in our recorded history. Each time we lost entire star systems. Dr. Kim So-jin watched through the viewing port as the mechanical swarm grew larger. She could see the aliens around her beginning to panic, their various forms of communication filling the air with urgent evacuation plans. This was exactly what Elder Voshitai had been asking about. A threat that couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be converted to friendship, couldn't be anything except destroyed or escaped from. The Devourers were unlike any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. They were self-replicating machines, created by some long-dead civilization as the ultimate weapon. They would arrive at a star system, consume entire planets to build more of themselves, and then move on to the next target. They had no interest in negotiation, no concept of mercy, and no other goal except endless expansion and consumption. Ambassador Thexval was already coordinating with her home fleet, preparing massive evacuation ships to carry as many people as possible to safety. We must begin immediate withdrawal, she announced to the human delegates. Our calculations show that resistance will only delay the inevitable by a few days while costing millions of lives. The standard protocol is complete evacuation of all inhabited systems in their path. Captain Cho Hae-jin had been listening to the alien evacuation plans with growing amazement. She was a career military officer who had spent years studying impossible situations, and the alien's response seemed completely backwards to her. Instead of looking worried or scared, she actually started smiling. "Wait a minute," she said, standing up and looking around the room. "You're telling me that your solution to this problem is to run away and let these machines eat entire star systems?" The alien delegate stared at her in confusion. Of course, that was the solution. It was the only logical response to an overwhelming threat. Save who you can, abandon what you must, and hope the enemy eventually runs out of fuel or breaks down on its own. Cho began walking toward the communications panel, her smile growing wider. Has anyone here ever seen an old Earth movie called Independence Day? Or maybe Starship Troopers? No? Well, you're about to get a real-life demonstration of what humans do when faced with impossible odds. She activated the ship's communication system and began broadcasting on all frequencies, reaching every human vessel in the area. "Attention all human ships and stations. This is Captain Cho Hyejin calling for volunteers to form a joint defense task force. We've got some uninvited guests who think they can just waltz in here and eat our neighborhood. Anyone interested in showing them some Earth-style hospitality?" The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Captain Park Ji-woo was the first to respond. "Count us in, Captain. The Peaceful Dawn may not be a warship, but we've got some creative modifications that might surprise these mechanical bullies." Lieutenant Commander Nam Soo-young chimed in from her research vessel. "We've been analyzing their approach patterns for the last hour. I think we might have found some interesting weaknesses in their formation." Within minutes, dozens of human ships were reporting their readiness to join the defense force. Scientists, explorers, medical ships, cargo haulers, everyone wanted to help fight off the Devourers. The aliens watched in disbelief as humans who had no military training began volunteering for what seemed like certain death. Dr. Kim So-jin found herself pressed into service as a tactical coordinator, helping to analyze Devourer technology while the human fleet organized itself. The aliens kept insisting that resistance was pointless, but the humans were already developing attack strategies and sharing information about enemy capabilities. The first battle began when a small group of Devourer scouts encountered Lieutenant Yoon Taemin's patrol fighter near the outer edge of the system. Yoon was supposed to be doing reconnaissance, staying hidden and gathering information. Instead, he decided to test the enemy's reaction time by making a direct attack run. His fighter was fast and agile, but it wasn't designed for combat against something the size of a small building. The Devourer scout's defensive systems quickly damaged his ship, knocking out his navigation systems and reducing his weapons to barely functional status. The alien observers expected him to retreat or call for help. Instead, Yoon's voice came over the communication system, calm and almost cheerful. "Control, this is Yoon. Navigation's gone, weapons at 30%, and I've got about 15 minutes of life support left. But you know what? The view's actually pretty spectacular up here. These Devourers are ugly as sin, but they sure know how to put on a light show." While he was talking, Yoon was still maneuvering his damaged fighter, using the last of his weapons to probe the Devourer's defenses and gather tactical data. Instead of panicking about his situation, he was treating it like an interesting puzzle to solve. "I'm getting some good readings on their shield frequencies," he continued, dodging another attack. "Looks like they rotate their defensive patterns every 37 seconds. If someone could hit them right at the rotation point, you might be able to punch through." Captain Cho coordinated the rescue mission that saved Yoon while simultaneously using his intelligence to plan their next attack. The aliens watched in amazement as humans turned a near disaster into a learning opportunity, using information gathered under fire to improve their tactics for the next engagement. But what surprised the aliens most was how the humans maintained their teamwork and morale throughout the battle. Instead of the grim determination or desperate fury they expected, human fighters kept up a constant stream of jokes, encouragement, and tactical coordination. They treated the fight against impossible odds like a challenging team sport. The main Devourer swarm arrived like a metallic storm cloud, blotting out the stars with thousands of consuming machines. Each one was massive, bristling with weapons designed to break apart planets and turn them into fuel. The alien evacuation fleets were already moving to safer distances, expecting to watch another tragic retreat from an unstoppable force. Admiral Song Jae-hyuk stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at what should have been humanity's darkest hour. He was 53 years old, a career officer who had spent decades studying military history and building bridges between different human cultures. Now he found himself commanding not just human ships but vessels from dozens of alien species who had decided to stay and fight alongside them. All ships, this is Admiral Song. His voice carried across the communication channels to every vessel in the combined fleet. I know what you're thinking. This looks impossible. The math says we should all be running away right now. But here's the thing about humans. We've never been very good at math when it comes to giving up. On the alien ships, commanders who were used to formal, rigid military protocols listened in amazement as Song continued his briefing. Instead of cold tactical analysis, he was talking to his fleet like they were family members gathering for a difficult but important task. Remember, we're not just taking out the trash today, Song announced with a grin that somehow carried through his voice. We're recycling it into victory. And if anyone asks later how we pulled this off, just tell them it was superior human engineering, both the technical kind and the kind that builds friendships across the galaxy. Even the aliens found themselves chuckling at his terrible pun. Dr. Zeflak, floating near the communication console on one of the alien vessels, pulsed with colors of amazement. In his species' entire history, military leaders had never used humor during combat. The concept seemed completely insane, yet somehow it was working. The battle began with the Devourers doing exactly what they always did, advancing in perfect formation, calculating the most efficient way to destroy every target in their path. Their computer systems had analyzed thousands of battles against other species, and they expected this one to follow the same predictable pattern. Initial resistance, gradual retreat, final evacuation, and then the slow consumption of abandoned worlds. What they encountered instead was something their programming had never prepared them for. The human fleet moved in patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully coordinated chaos. Ships would break formation to help damaged allies, then regroup in completely different arrangements. Instead of following standard tactical doctrine, human commanders were making it up as they went along, adapting to each moment of the battle. Lieutenant Commander Bae Soo-hyun was piloting her medical transport when she saw an alien research vessel take heavy damage. According to military protocol, she should have stayed clear of the combat zone and waited for the battle to end before beginning rescue operations. Instead, she flew directly into the heaviest fighting to evacuate the wounded alien crew. "This is Bae to all nearby ships," she called out while dodging Devourer weapons fire. "I've got 17 wounded Zephyrians on board and my engines are making some very unhappy noises. Could someone please create a distraction so I can get these folks to safety?" Captain Lee Won-sik immediately responded by leading his entire squadron in a seemingly reckless charge against the nearest Devourer cluster. To the alien observers, it looked like suicide. But Lee's attack wasn't designed to destroy the enemy. It was designed to draw their attention away from the medical transport, giving Bae the opening she needed to escape with her patients. This kind of tactical flexibility drove the Devourer computers crazy. They were programmed to predict enemy behavior based on efficiency and self-preservation. But humans kept making choices that prioritized protecting others over protecting themselves, creating openings and opportunities that no logical analysis could have predicted. The turning point came when Admiral Song realized that the Devourers had a central command core that coordinated all their movements. It was heavily protected, surrounded by layers of defensive machines, and seemed impossible to reach. But Song noticed something interesting. Every time a human ship moved to protect an alien vessel, the Devourers shifted their formation slightly to maintain maximum efficiency. "Attention all ships," Song announced. "We're going to try something that will either be remembered as brilliant or completely insane. I need every human vessel to move to protect our alien allies, even if it means exposing yourselves to enemy fire. Trust me on this one," the aliens protested, insisting they could retreat to safety and let the humans fight alone. But the human commanders refused to abandon their new friends. as human ships moved into protective positions around alien vessels. Taking heavy damage in the process, the Devourer formation began to shift and reorganize. Song had been right. The enemy's obsession with efficiency created a brief moment when their central core became vulnerable. "Now!" he shouted, and every ship in the fleet concentrated their fire on the exposed target. The destruction of the central core sent shockwaves through the entire swarm. Without their coordinating intelligence, the individual Devourers began making conflicting decisions, attacking each other as often as they attacked the Allied fleet. Within hours, the unstoppable mechanical swarm had torn itself apart. In the aftermath, the celebration aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human crew members and alien officers sat together, sharing stories about the battle and laughing about the absurd moments that had somehow led to victory. Elder Voshitai found himself telling jokes alongside human engineers who had jury-rigged impossible solutions to mechanical problems. "I understand now," the ancient alien said to Dr. Kim So-jin. "You don't just fight wars, you transform them into something that brings people together instead of driving them apart." The victory led to the establishment of the first human galactic defense academy, where alien species learned not just human military tactics but the philosophy behind them. Students discovered that the most powerful weapon against despair wasn't better technology or overwhelming force. It was the ability to find hope and laughter even in the darkest moments, while never forgetting that the ultimate goal wasn't victory, but protecting the future for everyone.